Hello, how are you doing? My name is Matthew Bost, and I'm doing this YouTube video today to pay tribute to my two best friends growing up, Judd and Frank Lawler. I've never done a YouTube video before, so hopefully it's okay. Try not to look down and stare at myself too much. Try to look into the camera. Um, I'm paying tribute to these two gentlemen because we lost them in a car accident almost 20 years ago. It'll be 20 years in October on the 13th that they were traveling home from Athens to home to St. Paris, and they were killed in a car crash. And we have missed them and mourned them ever since. And for whatever reason, this 20th year has been more difficult than years past. Of course, in the beginning it was very difficult, but some reason this year just seems different, and it's more difficult to deal with. So I wanted to pay tribute to them. We just had a tribute to them this weekend on Saturday at Graham High School. We had a band festival there where we all attended high school. And it was a wonderful tribute. Ken and Dolly, their mom and dad, were there, and I've got a picture here that I'll show you from the program of that band festival. There is Frank and Judd Lawler right there. For those of you who don't know them, again, they were both alumni of Graham High School and of Ohio University. We were all in the marching band together at Graham and at OU. And they were just very, very, very wonderful, fun-loving, free-spirited men. And so I want to pay tribute to them. Like I said, this has been a difficult month or so. It's just been really weighing on my mind. And I just had a conversation with a lady that we went to college with as well. We call her Beamer. Her name's Kelly. And she said the same thing, that she's just struggling with it too. So I want to get these thoughts out there. I'm just going to tell you guys a couple stories that I recall growing up. And, you know, if you guys, I hope you like the video. Like I think I said, this is my first YouTube video. So please like it if you know, if you do like it. Excuse me. Leave comments. You know, memories that you have. Maybe post your own videos. Again, I'm not real familiar with YouTube, how it works, but you know, maybe we can build on this a little bit too, and get a nice big group of tribute videos out there for the boys. I met Frank. I was in the same grade as Frank, and I met him probably in first grade, I'm thinking. And you know, I didn't really get to know him very well, though, until we got to fourth grade. My first really vivid memory of Frank is in fourth grade. He and I both submitted applications to be exchange students. And the program was called something like ISSE. I think it was International Student Exchange something. But anyway, we were putting in for a chance to go to Australia. And, you know, that's a big opportunity for a fourth grader to be able to do. And it was a pretty lengthy application process. We actually had to apply. We had to do it ourselves. Our parents couldn't help us with the application. We had to go through an interview process as well. And they were only taking one boy and one girl from the school, from Graham South Elementary School. And Frank ended up winning the opportunity to go on that trip. And I don't recall who the girl was that they took. I think it might have been Mary Weinert, but I'm not sure about that. So, you know, if you recall that and want to leave the comment, please do so. But that was kind of the nature of my relationship with Frank Lawler in those early days, and that we competed against each other quite a bit, and Frank always ended up winning. and I say that because in the next year, in fifth grade, we started in band together. And Frank and I both started out playing the alto saxophone. And our conductor at the time was a gentleman by the name of Mr. Du Bois. And he was a wonderful man. He was a wonderful teacher. I remember picking up the alto saxophone and really being good at it. Not trying to brag, but I picked it up right away, and Frank did too. And Frank that did that with a lot of music. Frank was just a very gifted, very naturally talented musician. And so it was just funny because I say we competed because we were both saxophone players, and we had 5 alto saxophone players starting out in the 5th grade, which is a pretty good number for a 5th grade band. And every week, Mr. Du Bois would, we'd practice all week. And at the end of the week, Mr. Du Bois would have us play, and then he would rank us in order, from 1st chair down to 5th chair. And every single week, 5th, 6th, and 7th grade, Frank got 1st chair and I got 2nd chair. And it was, and the other 3 just kind of filtered out behind us. And again, it was, we practiced our horns a lot. I remember taking my saxophone on vacation and practicing. And I remember always wanting to beat Frank out of that 1st chair spot just one time, just once. And I never did. And because Frank was just naturally better than I was. And no matter how much I practiced, he just always got 1st chair. And it wasn't like something where I was mad at him, but it was just, I set a goal for myself to do that, and I never accomplished it. So at some point, Mr. Du Bois decided it was time for him to retire. So we were getting in a new director by the name of Mr. Matthew Cool. And I saw this as an opportunity, right? Because I'm thinking a new director is going to see this a little bit differently, and maybe I'll get 1st chair with a new director. And with a name like Mr. Cool, right, it's got to work out. So I'm thinking, yeah, this is going to be different, and it wasn't. Mr. Cool did the exact same thing. Frank got 1st, I got 2nd, and everybody kind of lined up behind us. But the one thing that Mr. Cool did differently was one day after rehearsal was over, he addressed the band and he said, "Hey, I just wanted to let you guys know that we don't have enough trombone players in the band. And if anybody would be interested in switching from your current instrument to the trombone, please let me know." And I instantly raised my hand. I'm like, me, pick me. And Mr. Cool was surprised by that. I could see it got a little bit of a shock look in his face. And he said, "Okay, Matt, that's great. I'll talk to you about it tomorrow." And I remember looking over at Frank, and he was giving me the look like, "What are you doing? Are you crazy?" And then he said it. He's like, "What are you doing? Are you crazy?" And I said, "Well, yeah. Why?" and he's like, "Why do you want to switch for?" And I was like, "Well," I said, "Frank, don't get mad, man. Don't be upset with me. But if you and I continue to both play saxophone, I will never get 1st chair." And I set that as a goal for myself a long time ago to be a 1st chair musician. And Frank was like, "What does it matter? You've always been 2nd chair. What does it matter? You're a good saxophone player." Of course, that warmed my heart, that he would say that. And I said, "Frank, it's just, like I said, it's a goal. It's something I want to try." And he said, "So you're going to switch from a woodwind to a brass?" I'm like, "Yep." He said, have you ever played a trombone before?" I said, "Nope." He's like, "Do you own a trombone?" I said, "Nope." "Don't bother me with the details. I'll figure it out." And, God love my dad. He was always the king of, finding great deals. He found a trombone somewhere, and I ended up switching. And I will never forget, near the end of my 8th grade year, I actually got 1st chair trombone. And not bragging, again, I'm, just a story about us growing up together. But as soon as I sat down in that 1st chair for trombone, I leaned back in my chair and I looked over at the saxophone section, and Frank was already leaned back in his chair looking over at me with this big smile on his face. And I gave him the rock and roll sign, and I'm like, "Yeah!" And he just laughed and smiled, and shook his head and started putting his instrument away. And after the rehearsal was over, he met me in the hallway, and he shook my hand and congratulated me. And he said that that was a really good accomplishment to be able to do in less than a year. So, sorry. I was always proud of that moment, and never will forget that. So we went through high school, and I actually switched the summer between my 8th grade year and my 9th grade year. I switched from trombone to sousaphone, and I played the sousaphone all through high school and all through my days at Ohio University. And that was I actually didn't march my senior year of high school, but I still always wanted to attend OU, and so I took a year off from the marching band my senior year, and went on to OU. But anyway, when it was time to graduate high school, Frank and I, our goal, our lifelong goal, was to follow Judd and Stacy Pons and Beth Kite, Jeannie Turner, Scott Lemieux. There was a lot of people that had gone from Graham to OU, and of course Judd was, he was a role model of ours. And I skipped a little bit. Actually, our freshman year of high school was when I really got to know Judd real well, because he was a senior when we were freshmen. So we, he was our field commander his senior year of high school at Graham. And I just remember getting to know him really well because we all went to lunch together, and we all sat in the back of the cafeteria at Graham High School. And we had this little posse of people that were in band. Randy Oder was back there, and Katie Calver and myself. And I think Frank was there during that lunchtime too, And Kevin Whitney was back there. And it was great because, again, I got to know Judd a lot better during that year, and we talked about at lunch was music. We talked either what we were playing on the field, or what our favorite bands were at the time. We were all into Aerosmith, Led Zeppelin, classic rock. Guns N' Roses was out at that time, and were really big. So we were into the rock and roll, and so we talked a lot about that stuff. And that year we also got to go down to Florida. My freshman year of high school, the band got to go do a competition in Orlando, and then we got to march, at Epcot Center and Walt Disney World, and that was really probably one of the highlights of high school band for me, was that freshman year, because that trip was just so phenomenal to be able to take, and Mr. Cool led that trip and got that all approved. So it was a great time, and so like I was saying, we went through high school and graduated, and we landed at Ohio University as pre-freshmen, rookies, as they called us then. I don't know if they still call them that now, but we had to go to rookie camp. And we got down there, and we stayed with Judd that first night before rookie camp started. He was living in Lakeview Apartments. And I just remember, we got our stuff all moved in temporarily into his apartment, and, we were hanging out, and Judd was kind of giving us the lowdown. Of course, that would be his 4th year at OU. And, he was just telling us what to expect, and what was going to go on. And he started telling us about that first day at lunch. The freshmen were expected to get up in front of all the other freshmen and the staff and sing their high school fight song. And, we thought, well, hey, that's cool. That'll be easy. That we can do that. And Judd looked at us very sternly, and he said, under no circumstances are you boys going to sing your high school fight song. And I kind of looked over at Frank, and I'm like, what do you mean? What are we going to do? And Judd sat there with his arms crossed, and he said, you tell me, what are you going to do? And I said, Judd, aren't they going to get mad at us if we don't do what they tell us to do? He says, they'll only get mad at you if you're lame. So you better think up something epic to do right now. And he was absolutely serious. We had to make up a song to sing the next day at lunch on our first day of rookie camp, because we were not allowed to sing our fight song. And if you've ever seen the absolute serious side of Judson Sheldon Lawler, I never messed around when the serious side of Judd came out, because he was pretty, you know, he was intimidating. And so Frank and I were like, okay, what are we going to do? You know, so, and Judd's literally sitting there watching us, not moving, arms folded, just watching to see what we would come up with. So Frank, I remember, had seen a skit of some kind. He couldn't remember what the show was. And I really don't know all of YouTube's policies, so I'm not going to get into all of the bits of this song. It's actually a chant that we ended up doing, because some of it's pretty inappropriate. But part of it, Frank remembered in this skit that a guy said, he kind of said to another guy off in the distance, he said, "Let me see you urinate." And the guy said, "What'd you say?" And the other guy's like, "Let me see you urinate." And the other guy said, "You're an 8. You're an 8." You know, like that. And so we thought, okay, you know, that's cool. We could do something with that, you know. We could make up some more parts to it and kind of, you know, sing it or do something. So that's what we did. We took that idea that Frank had seen in some skit somewhere on some TV show, and we turned it into a chant. We made up, I think we had a total of 5 different little puns or whatever you want to call them that we did. And like I said, I really can't tell you any of the other ones because they're inappropriate, and I don't want this video to be blocked. So we made it up, and we decided that we were going to do it as a chant. So I was going to start off by saying really loud, "Let me see you urinate." And Frank was going to say, "What did you say? Let me see you urinate. What did you say? You're," and we both do, "You're an 8. You're an 8," you know, and we just go back and forth with this whole 4-verse chant. And so we wrote it all down, made up all the lyrics, and we told Judd, it's like, "Huh." And it was funny too, because watching Judd's face change from the absolute serious face to the eyes, his eyes were starting to light up, and he was starting to grin from ear to ear as we made up more stuff and, you know, got it more perfected. And so, you know, we wrote it all down, like I said, and we told Judd, "Hey, we're good. We got it done." He's like, "No, you're not done." We're like, "What do you mean?" He's like, Rehearse it right now." And I'm like, "Really? It's like 10:30 at night. We've got to be at rookie camp tomorrow." He again, absolutely serious. "Rehearse it now." So we got up, we rehearsed the whole thing. We did the whole thing once, and I'm so glad we did, because we messed it up really bad the first time that we did it. And so he said, "Yeah, see, do it again." So we got up, did it again, and we did it really good the second time. It wasn't a real hard chant to do, but we did it really good, and we're like, "Yeah, we got it now." He's like, "One more time." He said, "If you do it perfect this time, you can go to bed." And so we did it a third time, and I guess we did it good enough, because he laughed, and he said, "That's going to do. That's going to do. And you guys can go to bed now." So we went to bed, and got up the next morning for rookie camp, and we had the best morning of fundamentals I've ever had in my life. And that's kind of an oxymoron for those of you who have ever done fundamentals, you know, at any band camp, any rookie camp, especially OU 110. It was hot. It was very sunny. There wasn't a cloud in the sky that day. But again, it was just so enjoyable, because Frank and I were out there. We were giving 110%. We were leaving it all out on the field, just like all the cliches, you know. And we had the opportunity to go up front and demonstrate fundamentals for some of the other freshmen that were there. And I remember that's the first time I ever laid eyes on guys like Paul Shellhammer and Mike Dell and a young lady named Leah Don, who was a tuba player with me and Mike Dell, and Lisa Nemeke and Robin Pickett. My gosh, Angie Pinkwhite and Molly Nieport. I mean, we had a big group of freshmen there that were all very talented, and a lot of those people got to go up and demonstrate fundamentals, and it was just awesome to watch. It was awesome, but it was nerve-wracking too, because we're competing against those people for spots in the band, and that's where I met, again, like I said, Mike and Leodon, who were both amazing sousaphone players and amazing marchers already, and I'm like, oh crap, this is stiff competition. So anyway, we went through that morning rehearsal, and it was awesome. We were sweaty, but it was great. And went to lunch, and we were getting ready to be called up at some point to sing our fight song that we weren't going to sing. And I was nervous. I was a nervous wreck, man. I'm still not convinced that we're not going to get yelled at by staff or Mr. Young. And excuse me. My hands are shaking, and I'm just sitting there trying to sip water. I'm already losing my voice from all the fundamentals that we did that morning, and trying to just, make sure that we're going to be able to get this right. Frank and I are talking, like, oh, okay, I'm starting out, what are we going to do? So anyway, we got called up there, and I started off with the first line of the chant, which it was not the one about urinate. It was a different one that was inappropriate. And I remember I belted out that first line of that chant, and Mr. Young, Sylvester Young was the director at OU at the time, his eyes went like, whoop. Like when we said that first line, man, he was like, what are these guys doing? Like, they're crazy. And so we did the first section of it, and we did the funny part of that particular first section. And his eyes got a little bit smaller at that point, and everybody started laughing. And, people started to stand up, and they started to clap along with this chant. And, by the end of it, by the time we were done, excuse me, we did it perfectly. We nailed it. We did a little hip thrust at the end, and it was like, huh, and we gave each other a high five, and everybody stood up and clapped and was just laughing and, and having a good time. And that's one of the greatest memories of my entire 4 years at Ohio University in the band, was that moment when we did that. And it became a staple. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a cold. Every year after that, for 4 years, Frank and I sang that song before every posting of the block to all the band. And I didn't really find out till later, till after the boys were gone, that Frank would never do that chant again after I left. Frank and Judd, Frank marched, I believe, 2 years longer than I did. And, he said that was a Matt and Frank thing, and he wouldn't do it after I was gone. So that was always a very warming tribute to, and very special. And those of you who know the chant, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But it was just great. So we did all that, and we went through the rest of that afternoon's rehearsals and fundamentals in the evening, and we literally practiced until it got dark and we couldn't see anymore. And after that night was over, we all went back to Judd's apartment in Lakeview, and got showers, and we were talking about how the day went and how just phenomenal it was, and how we got to demonstrate fundamentals and sing that chant, and how well it went. And so we all went to bed, and of course this was Judd's apartment that we were staying in, and the popular theory among all my friends at OU is that we were probably out drinking, but we weren't. We did not go out drinking at all that night. We in fact, I don't think we even had any beer in the apartment that night. But you know, it was Judd's apartment, so he had a bedroom in the back that he was sleeping in, and Frank was sleeping on a pull-out couch, and I was sleeping on a couch near the sliding glass door. And we all three had alarm clocks, and we all three set our alarm clocks before we went to sleep, and we all three slept through our alarm clocks that next morning. We were late to our second day of rookie camp at Ohio University. If you can believe that, we were. And so I just remember waking up. I don't remember how late we were, but I remember it was one of those panic moments where I shot up out of bed and said, "Frank, we're late," you know, and he shot up out of bed and was like, "Ah," you know, and we both threw some clothes on real quick. We threw our shoes on. Judd was still sound asleep. He was the only one with a car. As freshmen, we didn't have cars down there at OU, and we did not know where his keys were. So Frank and I ran out of Lakeview Apartments, and you guys who know Athens pretty well, I think Lakeview's called something different now, but we ran out of Lakeview Apartments, down 6 flights of stairs, all the way to the practice field. And that was a pretty decent distance, and of course we were panicked, we were mad at ourselves, and we were running pretty fast. Thank God we had been running all summer long prior to going to OU and getting in shape, because we'd need it. And we ran to the practice field, and when we got there, I have never seen so many staff do like whoop 180s and look at us and just converge on us. And we were in trouble. I'm just going to put it that way. We were in a lot of trouble. And so we got there, and they made us run more. They made us run laps around the practice field. I do not remember how many laps we ran. But that was another thing that Frank was better than at me. He was a faster runner than I was. So he, took off, and I took off, and I was trying to keep up with him. I couldn't. And anyway, we got done with the prescribed number of laps, whatever that number was. And Matt Brunner was our field commander that year. And John Merritt was our percussion section leader. And both those gentlemen were standing there when we got done running and directed us to stand in front of them at attention in ski poles. For those of you who know what that is, we're standing at attention in ski poles. And I just remember John Merritt getting right up in my face, and he was like, "You better not move a muscle. You better not blink. You better not breathe. Don't move, freshman." And Matt was over there talking to Frank, probably saying very similar things. The rest of the freshman group was over here on this side. They were still, they were doing fundamentals on their own, the ones that were on time. And they were doing their own thing. And so Matt Brunner said, "Hey, guys got to warm up." I'm thinking, I'm already pretty warm. It's already pretty hot. And I'm already sweating profusely. And that wasn't the bad part about it. The bad part of it was while you're standing there at attention, there were sweat bees everywhere. And they were all over you. I mean, they were landing on you. You're trying not to move. And so anyway, he said, "Hey, well, it's time to warm up. So you guys are going to do up 8 and back 8, singing the Ohio University fight song." I'm like, okay, we can do this. And we're intense as we can possibly be. We are, getting our legs parallel, our toes pointed, everything we can possibly do to try to make this right. I know, nothing could make being late to your second day of rookie camp right, but we did everything we possibly could. And so we did up 8 and back 8, and up 8 and back 8, and up 8 and back 8. And we did that 9 times before we were done. That was challenging, and that was hard. We were both huffing and puffing. And I remember every time we would get to the end of an up 8, back 8, we would be facing away from Matt Brunner, and he would say, "Face front, and we'd go again. And so that last time, I remember after we were done the 9th time, he's like face front. And I saw Mr. Young off in the distance. And Matt was already walking over toward Mr. Young to talk to him. And I knew we were done, at least for the moment, doing up 8 and back 8. And, you know, we could take a little bit of a breather. And so Matt talked to Mr. Young for probably less than a minute, and Mr. Young waved us over to him, and we sprinted over there to him. And he said, "Why were you boys late this morning?" And, you know, we said, "Sir, we all set alarms last night, and we slept through them." And to this day, I do not know how that happened. I really don't. And, you know, I'll never know. But we tried to explain that to Mr. Young as best we could. And he point blank asked us, he said, "Were you guys out drinking last night?" And we said, "No, sir, we were not. We did not go out drinking. We didn't even have any beer at all." And he said, "Okay." He said, "Well, here's what's going to happen. I want you guys to fall back in with the rest of the freshmen. Get a water break before you do that. And I want you to do the rest of this rehearsal. And after lunch is over, I'm going to call your parents and let them know what happened. And then we're going to meet with the staff to decide whether or not we're going to let you stay for the remainder of rookie camp." And, you know, you think about times in your life where your hearts get broken. And that was one of them for both Frank and I. Because I literally felt like we just messed up our opportunity to be in the 110 as freshmen. I literally felt at that point that we would probably, at best, have to wait until our sophomore year to try it again. And so, you know, very dejected, we ran over to the water, and the rest of the freshmen were already done with their water break. They were starting to line up, so we literally chugged a little bit of water, and we fell back in with them, and we did the rest of that rehearsal. We went to lunch, and we waited. We got some water and went back to our room. That we had a room there on South Green where the rookie camp was taking place. We went back to that room, and we awaited Mr. Young's phone call, and we waited for a while, and finally the phone rang, and it turned out to be my mom. And, you know, she was, of course, concerned. She's like, "Hey, what happened? What's going on?" And I said, we overslept this morning. We slept through our alarms. You know, I don't know why. We all set an alarm. Don't know how it happened. And she's like, "Were you out drinking?" And I said, "No, we weren't. I promise you we weren't." And, excuse me. I said, "Mom, we're expecting a call from Mr. Young. So can I please call you back here in a little bit and let you know what's going on?" And she said, "Yeah, just call me back as soon as you find something out." So hung up with Mom, and we waited for a little bit more. Frank was sitting on the bunk over here to my left. The phone rang again. I picked it up and said hello, and Mr. Young said, "Is this Frank?" I said, "No, this is Matt." And he said, "Is Frank there with you?" I said, "Yes, sir. He's sitting right here beside me." And he said, "Well, we just met as a staff, and we have decided that we are going to let both of you stay through the remainder of rookie camp." I think at that point I almost passed out because that was the best news that I had heard in a long time. And he said, you know, and I said, "Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for allowing us this opportunity." I was being as thankful as I could possibly be, because I truly was so grateful that they weren't kicking us out. And Frank, I saw he put his head in his hands, and I finished the conversation with Mr. Young, to which he said, I want you guys to understand that this is your only opportunity to mess up." He said, "This is the one chance you get." And I said, "Yes, sir, we both completely understand, and it will not happen again." He said, "Okay, well, I'll see you at rehearsal. The next rehearsal starts in 15 minutes. Why don't you guys come out a few minutes early and talk to me?" So, I went over to Frank after I hung up with Mr. Young, and I put my hand on his shoulder, and I said, "Hey, we've still got a chance, buddy." And he said, "Thank you, thank you, thank you, God. Thank you, thank you." Thank you so much. And I said, amen. And Frank stood up and he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, we are not staying at Lakeview anymore until this whole thing is over. And I said, absolutely. I'm right there with you, man. We're not going back there. We're going to stay here where all the other freshmen is. So even if we oversleep again, we'll hear them all getting ready, hopefully, and get up on time. So we never did stay with Judd again until after the posting of the block. And so, we went through the rest of rookie camp and it got much better after that. And we still, we had to prove ourselves. We had to prove that we weren't screw-ups, not only to the staff, but to the other freshmen that were there, that had never been late. And I felt a real heavy responsibility, and Frank did too, to make sure that we proved ourselves worthy of the 110 after we messed up so bad. And so we went through rookie camp. We did the whole, the merging of the block that they do. And then we got to the posting of the block night. And I remember being very nervous about that too, because like I said, there's amazing, talented musicians that try out for that band. And I didn't know. I didn't know if I was going to make it or not. I really didn't. I didn't have a clue. And I felt like, that late occurrence was definitely something that could keep me out. I've had all the confidence in the world in Frank. He was already by that time almost a world-class musician, in my opinion, and he was a great marcher too. So and I thought he would get in, but I wasn't so sure about myself. But I remember another piece of advice Judd gave us before the posting of the block. He said, go up there, and whatever happens, if you find your name in the block, do not celebrate in that room. You come outside and you find me, and we'll go celebrate. If your name's not on the block, that's okay too. Just come on out and find me, and we'll talk about it. And I remember seeing my name in the block my freshman year, and I remember finding Frank's name in the block too. And that was one of the best feelings I had ever had in my life up until that point, was making the 110 block in 1993. So, after that, really, at Ohio University, there's probably 1,000 different stories I could tell. But really the rest is history. As far as Ohio University, I mean, I marched 4 years, and Judd and Frank marched 7 and 6, respectively. And we had so many good times, and there's so many stories about trips and music and laughter and camaraderie. And there's some ornery stories too, of course. It was college, it was Ohio University, and we just had a wonderful time. Those 4 years that I spent at Ohio University were literally 4 of the best years of my entire life. I'm 44 right now, so that says a lot. Ohio University is like a second home to me. I love going to homecoming down there and reminiscing with all those people. And Opie, I can't forget Opie, Andy Wildman. Again, as a 44-year-old, my memory's gotten a little bad, so I don't recall people's names as quickly as I used to. But just so many wonderful people that were down there, that we became friends with, and lifelong friends, and those are bonds that never get broken. And it's wonderful to have. Although I think the last story I'm going to tell you is actually going to be a story that is specifically about Frank, but it could have been about Judd too, because it really highlights the Lawler boys' confidence and their swagger and their determination, and it really highlights the way they were raised too. And so this story actually goes all the way back to 5th grade again. And we were in Mr. Worth's class in 5th grade at Graham South Elementary School. And class was just about ready to start. And everybody was in there except for Frank. Excuse me, sorry about my cough. So everybody was in there except Frank. And I know Frank was at school that day because I had seen him. I had talked to him. But he was late to the beginning of class for whatever reason. Mr. Worth was not a teacher who suffered fools very well. And so, he was a little bit intimidating. And I was worried. I was worried about Frank because he was never late to class. He was a great student. And so I remember I sat kind of close to the door, the entrance door to the classroom. And Frank sat on close to the other side. He sat by another good friend of his named Jason Davenport. And I remember leaning back and looking over at Jason and getting his attention and be like, hey, where's Frank at? And I'm looking at myself again. And Jason's like, I don't know. And I'm like, oh, man. So I'm kind of worried, right? I'm 5th grade. What is that, 8 years old, 9 years old? So my imagination's starting to run wild about where Frank is. And at that time, Mr. Worth, the bell goes off. Mr. Worth gets up and goes and shuts the door. And boom, I'm like, Frank's doomed. He's going to be late to Mr. Worth's class. And so, I'm sitting there kind of perseverating about where Frank is and what kind of catastrophe he's gotten himself into. And, at Graham South Elementary, we used to have this big dome monkey bar thing that people would climb up on, and they'd sometimes get stuck on and sometimes fall off of and break bones and stuff, and so I'm imagining Frank up there, and then I'm thinking, this is Graham South Elementary. We're literally in the middle of a cornfield surrounded by woods. He could have gotten drug off by Sasquatch for all I know. Who knows, right? My imagination is literally going rampant. So Mr. Worth starts the class, and that particular day, he decided to start class by asking us, what is the most powerful force in the universe? And a lot of people raised their hand. And I even raised my hand, even though I wasn't really thinking about what the answer was. I was thinking about Frank getting beat up by some hairy Bigfoot. And he called on somebody, Mr. Worth called on somebody over on the left side, and they gave an answer that was incorrect. And then he called on me, and I still hadn't thought of an answer yet, right? So I'm like, oh man, what's a force in the universe? Gravity is a force. So I shout out gravity. And he's like, no, that is a force, and it is very powerful, Matthew, but that is also incorrect, as Mr. Worth liked to say. And I was like, fine, I've got better things to think about anyway. And so he calls on a third person, and just as that third person was starting to give an answer, the classroom door over on this side opens, and in strolls Frank Lawler. And he's standing up tall. He's got a huge smile on his face. Looks as happy as he can be. He's not all beat up, so obviously he wasn't, drug off into the woods. He didn't fall off the monkey bars. He was good, right? So he's walking past me, and naturally I go from worrying about my friend as he's walking by. I stick my foot out to try to trip him, and he sees me do it and steps over. And then Mr. Worth says, Mr. Boss, you just lost 10 minutes of your recess for trying to trip Mr. Lawler. I was like, oh, man, how did he see that? I'm in the front row, right? But I'm a 5th grader, so I'm like, he sees everything. I was in the front row. So anyway, Frank steps over my foot. Excuse me. And Mr. Worth says to Frank, Mr. Lawler, since you were late to my class, maybe you can answer this question that nobody else has been able to answer so far. Frank walked all the way down to his desk, and he never sat down. He stayed standing up. He faced Mr. Worth, and he said, sure, what's the question? And Mr. Worth said, Frank, what is the most powerful force in the universe? And Frank chuckled, and he smiled, and he said, and I'll never forget this, he said, well, that's easy, it's love. And the second that he said that, my mind was blown. Because I knew that was the right answer. And I knew somewhere down in my heart that I should have known that. But, I couldn't come up with it. And at that same moment too, a lot of the kids in the classroom started laughing at Frank for giving that answer, mostly the boys. Because again, fifth grade boys do not think that love is powerful. They think that love is gross and it gives you cuties, right? So they were laughing. And I did not laugh because, like I said, I knew Frank's answer was correct. And I focused my attention back over to Mr. Worth. And I saw that Mr. Worth had a bit of a shocked expression on his face as well. And he said, "Frank, that is absolutely right. How did you know that?" And if I live to be 150 years old and I have Alzheimer's for the last 50 years, I will never forget. Frank again smiled at Mr. Worth and he said, "Because God is love and there's nothing more powerful in the universe than God." And he sat down. And you could have heard a pin drop. And again, my mind was just blown. And it was blown because I had never seen that before. I had never seen a person my own age with enough self-confidence to walk into a pretty intense teacher's classroom late with a huge smile on his face, avoid being tripped, and answer a question from a somewhat intimidating teacher with a smile on his face, with all the confidence in the world. Even if he was intimidated, he never showed it. And then after giving an answer, getting laughed at and not showing any bit of being frustrated or being intimidated, he exuded self-confidence. And I didn't have a lot of that growing up. You know, I grew up with a speech impediment. I grew up pigeon-toed. I grew up, chunky. And I'm sure there's some other things I could add to that. But I just didn't have a lot of self-confidence at that point in my life. And one of the things that did for me, that singular day in fifth grade, was it taught me that it's okay to be confident despite what your situation might be. And that confidence is very powerful, and it's very attractive, and I emulated that from that day forward. I literally emulated Frank and Judd's confidence as much as I could, and like I said, I didn't have it naturally, so I kind of had to fake it for a long time, but I still at least tried to carry myself like Frank and Judd did, and tried to emulate their confidence. And I never got to tell Frank or Judd that story before they passed away. And honestly, it didn't really even kind of pop back into my mind until after they were gone. And I've never gotten to tell Ken and Dolly, their mom and dad, that story either. And I hope to, or I hope they hear that story soon. If not on this video, I'd rather tell them in person. But to me, that was a very important day, and that was the day that I literally knew I wanted to be friends with Frank for the rest of my life, and I wanted to be friends with Judd too, because I knew they were trustworthy, I knew they were confident, I knew they were grounded in their faith, and I knew that they were fun. I knew that they had a wonderful sense of humor, and that all took place in fifth grade. And that, I think, to me, is why Frank and Judd's memory lives on 20 years after they're gone, and we're still having festivals to honor them, and the OU band is playing a show, for their homecoming to honor them because of the wonderful, wonderful character that they had. And I want to close this video by talking to the band kids. Well, not necessarily the band kids. Any kid in high school that is currently in band or in a sport, even the current 110 members, that are in college, I want to give you a message with all the confidence I can possibly muster to, again, emulate my friends. And that message is that Frank was absolutely correct that day. Love is the most powerful force in the universe. And if you really want to make a difference with your young lives, I challenge you, after your next rehearsal, after your next practice, I challenge you to take a look around. Take a look around at the young men and women that are surrounding you, and put your cell phone away and go up to one of them and shake his or her hand and look them in the eye and tell them thank you. Tell them thank you for sharing their journey. And tell them thank you for sharing their talent with you and their time and their friendship. Because if it hasn't happened to you yet, I'm not trying to be morbid, but if it hasn't happened to you yet, you're going to lose somebody that you love. And it's, it's probably going to be a surprise. And that's my cat. So, take time right now to tell these people that are surrounding you how much they mean to you. And after you do that with a friend, I want you to go home, and I want you to do the same thing with your parents. And I want you to do the same thing with your cat, who I'm going to let out real quick so that she quits meowing at me, for goodness sakes. There. So, do the same thing with your parents. Do the same thing with your siblings and your neighbors. Spend some time telling these people that you are spending your days with, that they're important to you and that you love them. You will never regret that. I guarantee you that. And I don't have a lot of regrets about, Frank and Judd as far as, our relationship. I mean, there are a few there, but, we talked about our friendship a lot when we were together. And, we had some rough times, but we always overcame those. But I just don't want anybody to, to take that chance of not being able to say that. And I want to start kind of a little bit of a challenge here. In honor of Judd and Frank's memory, I want to challenge you high school and you college students, if you get to see this video, I hope somebody sees this video, to make a commitment to spend a little bit of time every single day of your life, whether you knew Frank and Judd or not, whoever you want to pay tribute to, take a little bit of time every single day to spread what Frank knew to be the most powerful force in the universe, which is love. That is what our world needs right now more than anything. It needs love. It needs compassion. It needs sympathy. And so, if you do that, I think it'll be rewarding. And it could just change our life and our country a little bit. And hey, why not start right here in the great Bobcat state, right? Sorry, Buckeyes. This is the Bobcat state. So, do that. Challenge yourself to do that every single day. Tell somebody what they mean to you. Tell somebody they're important. And I'm going to start off. I'm going to do it myself because I wouldn't ask you guys to do something that I'm not willing to do. So I'm going to start off by addressing you right now. If you're watching this video, I want you to know that you are a very, very important, special, unique, talented human being. And you are worthy of love. You are worthy of respect. And you are worthy of dignity. And I think that you have a lot to give to this world. So that's my tribute to my friends, Frank and Judd Lawler. And I truly hope that, maybe it's a little bit too much to hope, but I hope that this will go viral. And I hope that millions of people see it. And I hope that in honor of my friends that we will start a revolution in this country of spreading love, spreading the most powerful force in the universe. It may sound simple, it may sound trite, but I think we can all change the world. And I want to tell you one more thing, you young people, before I close. If you do that, if you legitimately invest time in giving compassion to other people, a little bit at a time, every single day, at some point you're going to get to the end of your life, or close to the end, when you're old and gray, and you're going to be able to look back and you're going to realize what a truly meaningful, rich, and wonderful existence that you've lived. And you're going to be, I think you're going to be very, very surprised by how many people love you and how many lives you've touched, and just taking a small amount, a fraction of your time every day to spread love. So thank you very much. I hope that your day is well, and I hope we can meet in person. If you like the video, please like it down there on the bottom. Add any comments that you'd like. I'd love to hear from you, and God bless you, and have a wonderful day. Thank you very much.